alert. Actor Jussie Smollett is set to appear in court just a bit later today, surrendering to police early this morning. Authorities accusing Smollett of faking a hate crime attack because he was dissatisfied with his salary. Welcome back to America's Newsroom. I'm Sandra Smith.
I'm Bill Hammer. Something else we just watched, last hour. Smollett's mugshot is now public, released about an hour ago. As he gets ready to face a judge later this afternoon, the latest twist in this case, coming after two brothers initially suspected in the attack, told a grand jury that Smollett staged the entire thing and paid them for their participation. Wrote a check, in fact, for some of that. A dramatic police conference that we watched together just last hour.
I'm left hanging my head and asking why. Why would anyone, especially an African-American man, use the symbolism of a noose to make false accusations? How could someone look at the hatred and suffering associated with that symbol and see an opportunity to manipulate that symbol to further his own public profile?
That is Eddie Johnson from Chicago. This is Matt Finn now live outside headquarters. Matt, hello.
Bill, good morning. Well, actor Jussie Smollett stars in the show Empire, which is filmed here in the city of Chicago. Now Chicago's police superintendent says this city embraced this actor, who then turned around and slapped this city in the face.
This publicity stunt was a scar that Chicago didn't earn and certainly didn't deserve. To make things worse, the accusations within this phony attack received national attention for weeks. Celebrities, news commentators, and even presidential candidates weighed in on something that was choreographed by an actor.
Police say Smollett paid the brothers a total of $3,500 via a check and then promised a $500 follow-up. Police say the Osundaro brothers testified that Smollett planned this attack because he was allegedly upset by how much he was being paid by the show Empire. Police say the brothers agreed to testify against Smollett in the 47th hour of their 48-hour hold, and at that point, police classified the brothers as witnesses, not co-conspirators. The Chicago police chief says he wishes families of real victims here in Chicago got this much public attention. Police say they tracked the brothers via a rideshare car that they used. They interviewed 100 people and looked over 55 cameras over what they call a meticulous weeks-long investigation, leading to Jussie Smollett turning himself in this morning, charged with a felony count of filing a false police report, and now he is set to appear in bond court at 1:30 local time. Bill,
Matt
Sandra.
Finn, thank you so much. Matt Finn reporting again in Chicago there. Thanks.
Fox News alert on dramatic new revelations about the Hillary Clinton email case. The FBI's top lawyer in 2016 saying he thought Clinton should have been prosecuted until, quote, pretty late in the investigation. James Baker making the bombshell claim during closed-door testimony before a congressional committee last October. Trey Gowdy knows a little bit something about that. He joins us live now. Good morning to you, sir. So what can you tell us about this? I'm looking through the words from James Baker. Said that high-level officials at the Bureau were arguing about whether to bring the charges against Clinton, I think up until the end, and he said that he thought from the beginning that Clinton's behavior was alarming and appalling.
Yeah, it impeaches one of the most famous lines from the Comey July 5th press conference. Remember, he said no reasonable prosecutor would disagree with the conclusions that he had reached, except, of course, his own general counsel, Jim Baker. I think what frustrates those of us that investigated this fact pattern is that Comey made his mind up that Secretary Clinton had committed no offense weeks and weeks before he ever interviewed her. So those of us that care about the justice system, those of us that want this impartial person judging simply the facts and not the identity of the parties, we do wonder how you can decide the issue of intent and knowledge 6 weeks before you ever interview the single best source of evidence for intent and knowledge.
Very interesting. Here's the actual quote from Baker on that closed-door testimony in October. Trey says, quote, "My original belief, well, after having conducted the investigation and towards the end of it, then sitting down and reading a binder of her materials," Hillary Clinton's obviously, "I thought that it was alarming, appalling, whatever words I said, and argued with others about why they thought she couldn't be charged." It's really something to look back and read that.
It is, and for all the Democrats and the D.C. media that criticize Republicans for having this investigation, remember, Sandra, there was a lot of criticism for Goodlatte and I looking back into the decisions made in 2016 and 2017. This is what happens when a good lawyer like John Ratcliffe, the Republican from Texas, has an unlimited amount of time to ask relevant questions of people who have access to information. This is what a congressional investigation should look like. Not that freak show, carnival-like 5-minute questioning that most of your viewers see on television. This was all done behind closed doors. The only real mistake Republicans made is we didn't leak this transcript. This interview took place in October of last year. We just didn't leak the transcript.
Fascinating to hear that. We've also been talking a lot about Andrew McCabe, the former deputy FBI director. He's been given a lot of interviews, and we've heard a lot from him lately. He said this on another network yesterday.
I have to be careful in the way that I talk about this. But I have seen the letter that the president wrote, purportedly himself, justifying the firing of Jim Comey. I will tell you that one of them is he claims to want to fire the director of the FBI because of his failure to fire me.
Trying to explain why the president fired James Comey. Your thoughts?
Well, there are lots of folks that at various times wanted to fire Jim Comey. Every Democrat in America wanted to fire him in 2016 after he relaunched the Hillary Clinton investigation in October. Schumer and Pelosi and Hank Johnson and Steve Cohen all expressed displeasure with his running of the agency. I think the only person in America, Sandra, that would have kept Jim Comey on as the FBI director in January of 2017 was Donald Trump. So the notion that McCabe thinks it is that you have to be an agent of a foreign power to fire Jim Comey, Rod Rosenstein drafted the memo. Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General for the Department of Justice, who's as straight an arrow as you can possibly find, he took exception to Jim Comey's conduct. So the notion that it has to be obstruction to get rid of somebody that almost everyone at one point or another wanted to get rid of is probably the best evidence of why McCabe wound up getting let go.
And before I move on to the last topic here, I just want to get this in. He was just asked about his relationship with the former FBI director, James Comey, Andrew McCabe, and he said, quote, "I don't really have a relationship with Jim now." Very interesting to hear that as well, considering the loyalty that has been talked about so much in recent days. I want to move on to what we just learned from Jussie Smollett in Chicago. The breaking details coming from the Chicago Police Department there, surrendered this morning. Trey, I want to tap into your legal expertise and your thoughts on this case and what we just learned.
Well, I thought the chief of police did such a remarkable job. I mean, the mixture of sadness and outrage. Think of all the police resources, the search warrants, the subpoenas, the hours spent looking at surveillance tapes, the hours spent interviewing witnesses on something that did not happen. All those police resources that were diverted away from real victims. Now, think of all the real victims of physical attacks and racist instances and how they must feel, how it undercuts the nature of an incredibly serious crime for somebody to stage it. It was premeditated. There was a tremendous level of planning. This was not a spontaneous decision. So the person's clearly troubled. I mean, normal people do not do this, but it's a waste of resources, and it undercuts people's confidence in the justice system. I give a lot of credit to the chief of police in Chicago for how he handled that press conference and the explanations he gave, and how he feels as a person of color.
Absolutely. He started out with that. He's talking about Eddie Johnson, the superintendent of police there, and it was really something to hear his words, a very emotional, very passionate man about everything that has happened there over the past month and the resources that were deployed. Trey Gowdy, great to have you start off our 11 o'clock hour this morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Another alert now on a story that could be a significant arrest here. A Coast Guard officer now in custody on suspected of plotting domestic terror attacks on prominent politicians and journalists. Lieutenant Christopher Hassan, arrested by FBI agents about a week ago after authorities seized a pile of weapons and a hit list of targets at his home in Maryland. Jennifer Griffin's watching that story. She's live at the Pentagon. Jennifer.
Bill, the FBI arrested Lieutenant Hassan last Friday in the parking lot of the Coast Guard headquarters in Washington, D.C., where he had worked as an acquisitions officer for the past 3 years. Inside his apartment, the FBI found 15 firearms and more than 1,000 rounds of ammunition, according to court documents. There were 30 vials of human growth hormone and evidence he had purchased 4,200 pills of a morphine-like drug since 2016. There were vials of synthetic urine that presumably would allow him to pass a drug test. Hassan allegedly planned to kill top Democratic lawmakers and media personalities at MSNBC and CNN. The 49-year-old Coast Guard lieutenant was previously enlisted in the Marine Corps from 1988 to 1993 and later the Army National Guard. The self-described white supremacist was obsessed with neo-Nazi views and wanted to establish a white homeland and said, "I am dreaming of a way to kill almost every last person on Earth." Court documents provide more shocking details. Quote, "The defendant intends to murder innocent civilians on a scale rarely seen in this country." Inside Hassan's home in Silver Spring, Maryland, just 8 miles from the Capitol, investigators found more evidence. On his work computer, they found a hit list that included Democratic senators Richard Blumenthal, Tim Kaine, Chuck Schumer, Elizabeth Warren, and Cory Booker, among others. Court documents referred to Hassan as a domestic terrorist who spent hours online studying the 1,500-page manifesto of a Norwegian terrorist who killed 77 people in Norway. Hassan's computer search history included phrases like "best place in D.C. to see congresspeople" and "civil war if Trump impeached." He also expressed interest in a biological attack on the nation's food supply. Lieutenant Hassan will appear in federal court in Maryland at 1 p.m. Eastern, Bill.
Thank you, Jennifer. Watch it then. Thanks. From the Pentagon today, Jennifer Griffin.
Now to this Fox News alert, the Trump administration saying a so-called ISIS bride will not be allowed to return to the U.S. Her family's attorney is here. He will join us live with reaction.
Also, Democrats working on a plan to stop the national emergency declaration for the president, but are they just spinning their wheels? Brett Baer is going to analyze that. We'll talk to Brett coming up live next.
This is a crisis of his own making because it was a campaign pledge that took heat and propelled him to victory, and he feels the need to keep reciting what is a lie.
Republicans wouldn't have tolerated this if Obama did it. They shouldn't tolerate it when Donald Trump is doing it.
What do you think? Good morning.
Hey, Senator, we knew that the investigation was present at the beginning about McCabe and lying to investigators. Now that confirmation from his attorney, and it's good to put in context of all the book tour interviews that he's done over the past few days. So there's that side of it. I also think it's interesting that we are getting to the end here, as we predicted, to the Mueller investigation. And we have sources saying it's in coming days, a couple of people saying as soon as tomorrow. You take it all with a grain of salt. You don't know until you don't know. But the decision lies with Bill Barr, now the Attorney General, how much and if anyone learns anything about that report. All he has to tell Congress is it's done, we got it, and it's over. One would think that we hear more than that, but it's also important to look back at all of the hyperbolic sound bites about people saying that the president was never going to let Mueller finish this job, that Congress was worried that the president was going to fire Mueller, and they were thinking about passing legislation to prevent that. As we get to the end of this road, just to look back and say, okay, I guess he was right that he said he was never going to do that.
So to wrap up on this particular topic, Brett, what right now is the expectation or guidance that we have on when this might be out, the Mueller report?
Well, we're being told it's going to be handed to the Justice Department, specifically to the Attorney General, in coming days. Now, whether that's tomorrow or next week, it's hard for me to believe that all of this is going to come to a head while the president is overseas in Vietnam. But, it could go to the Attorney General, and then the decision about moving forward as far as dissemination after that could be after the president is back.
Meanwhile, Brett, it was fascinating to watch Eddie Johnson, the superintendent of the Chicago Police Department there a few moments ago, standing really before reporters there. He acknowledged the large presence that was there because this is a story and a case that gained national attention. And he took a moment there to reference the rush to judgment that was made on this. Do we have that sound? Let's listen.
This publicity stunt was a scar that Chicago didn't earn and certainly didn't deserve. To make things worse, the accusations within this phony attack received national attention for weeks. Celebrities, news commentators, and even presidential candidates weighed in on something that was choreographed by an actor.
And here we are, just a short time after we've been having that discussion revolving around the Covington High School students, Brett.
That's right, and this rush to judgment thing is real, and there are going to be some presidential candidates who have to answer the question again today. Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, who both said that it was a modern-day lynching when the first story came out. After they were asked to clarify, they said, well, let's not rush to judgment now, and let's wait till the facts come out. Well, now the facts are out, and those presidential candidates will have to answer for those statements. They haven't had to answer for other statements. For example, the Brett Kavanaugh hearings where everyone rushed to stand by Dr. Christine Blasey Ford in that. When asked about the accusers of Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax in Virginia, it is, wait, let's see where the facts take us. So it's your point of view, and obviously they jumped in with both feet on this at the beginning.
We saw a lot of that right away, and here we are today. He will be in court this afternoon, Jussie Smollett. Brett Baer, I'm sure you'll have a lot more on that and all the other big headlines today. Coming up, special report, 6 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. Brett, thank you.
You got it. See you, Senator.
Thank you.
About 20 past. Breaking news now south of the border. Another migrant caravan apparently now forming. More than 1,000 people involved crossing into southern Mexico. We'll get you details on what's happening there. And a very different job for an Illinois Congressman. Adam Kinzinger has been deployed to the southern border. Some exclusive access to what's happening on that mission. Coming up.
Protect this country from, frankly, all the drugs that are coming over is awesome. And it's not the first time I've done it, and I hope it's not the last.
About 1,000 migrants now crossing into Mexico. We're told there was a brief confrontation with police, but the group was then able to eventually proceed forward. All this coming now as U.S. military helicopters are being used in Arizona to move Border Patrol agents across these remote and rugged pieces of terrain. And that man you see right there is Congressman Adam Kinzinger out of Illinois. He is among the National Guard troops assisting border security efforts in the Southwest. Casey Stiegel's live in Tucson, Arizona. Fox News exclusive today on what you found there. Casey, good morning.
Hey, Bill, good morning. Yeah, this has been fascinating. Listen to this. There are about 1,800 National Guard troops currently deployed along the entire southwest border, about 600 of them right here in Arizona, where air resources are key, and that is where an Illinois congressman comes in.
We'll just taxi out, get out there, we'll brief all the departure.
Welcome to Congressman Adam Kinzinger's second job.
We don't talk about politics. We just hang out, we do the mission.
His mission has been piloting this military intelligence plane, the RC-26, over the Arizona-Mexico border for the past 2 weeks.
Well, it's neat because, when I'm on active duty, I've become apolitical.
Before politics, Kinzinger served in the U.S. Air Force, doing tours of duty in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Now a lieutenant colonel with the Air National Guard, he's fighting a different kind of battle.
Border Patrol has such a vast area out here they're trying to cover. They've asked us to bring air assets to help them.
The mountainous border terrain makes it difficult to spot illegal activity, but inside the Joint Task Force West Center, the work of Kinzinger and other pilots is crunched and analyzed in real time.
It helps us put the correct air asset on a target It helps us answer the call for agents when agents are in the field requesting air support.
Officials say information and pictures gathered from flights like these can help stop smugglers and cartels.
To protect this country from, frankly, all the drugs that are coming over is awesome, and it's not the first time I've done it, and I hope it's not the last.
Now, the congressman's 2-week deployment is coming to a close right now, and Bill, he says that when he gets back to Washington, he would like to sit down with President Trump personally and talk to him about his firsthand experiences out here at the border.
He'll have the story. Casey Stiegel, thank you, live in Tucson, Arizona.
He will.
An American ISIS bride begging to come back to the United States. The attorney for Hoda Muthana's family says she has the right to come home. What President Trump and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo are saying about this in a live report from the White House. Also, her family's attorney is standing by.
Yeah, I don't get the heartstrings deal. This is a woman who inflicted enormous risk on American soldiers, on American citizens. She's a terrorist.
30 now here in New York, the Trump administration saying that the American ISIS bride, Hoda Muthana, shown here, left Alabama 4 years ago and cannot come back to the U.S. Her attorney argues she's a U.S. citizen because she was born here. White House correspondent Kevin Court from the North Lawn now. Mike Pompeo was strong on this earlier today with Maria. Kevin, good morning to you.
Good morning, Bill. She espoused violence against American citizens online, and that appears to be, at least in part, why the U.S. government is saying, you can't come back here. You're a threat. Not just to America, you're a threat to our way of life. The president talking about this online, he said he instructed Mike Pompeo, and he said that the secretary fully agreed not to allow Muthana back into the country. That was a tweet from yesterday. As you pointed out, she was in fact born here in America, in New Jersey. She was the daughter of a former diplomat at that time. She later lived in Alabama before leaving voluntarily to join ISIS abroad. She had those social media posts calling for terrorist acts here in the U.S. This morning, as you also pointed out, Bill, interesting, Mike Pompeo said that she, in effect, has forfeited the privilege of living in the U.S.
I don't get the heartstrings deal. This is a woman who inflicted enormous risk on American soldiers, on American citizens. She's a terrorist. She's not coming back. President Trump made clear that she wasn't coming back. She's not a U.S. citizen. She is not entitled to U.S. citizenship, and she's not coming back to our country to pose a threat.
However, her attorney, Hassan Shibli, posted photos of documents on Twitter yesterday, including a birth certificate that he said proves she's an American and is therefore entitled to due process. He later tweeted this: "We must put up a fight. This is much bigger and broader than Hoda Muthana. This is about presidential overreach and an attempt to strip citizenship without due process. Real Donald Trump will use this against Latinos to strip birthright citizenship. Must fight to protect Constitution." However, as her attorney also knows, there are a number of provisions in U.S. law that you can effectively forfeit your citizenship if you're involved in terror group activity abroad. It'll be something for the courts, but for now, she's not coming back, Bill, says the White House.
Kevin, thank you for that. And as you mentioned here, the attorney Hassan Shibli is with us now, the attorney representing the Muthana family. And sir, good morning to you, and thank you for your time today.
Good morning.
Mike Pompeo calls your client a terrorist and says she's not coming home. How do you respond to that?
Well, to be clear, I represent the family. The family reached out to me when they first learned that their daughter was brainwashed and ran away to join this monstrous group of criminal thugs known as ISIS. So immediately I advised the family and helped the family to reach out to the FBI and Department of Homeland Security to report that Hoda ran away to Syria and to see what we can do to intervene to stop that and to make sure she's brought back through the legal system and frankly that she's held accountable for her actions. And people shouldn't forget that Hoda herself right now and her family are not saying that she should just come back home, that she should get a free pass. Everybody acknowledges that what she did was horrible, disgusting, unacceptable, but we also acknowledge that America is great because of our legal system. And as an American citizen, Hoda herself and her family simply want to face our legal system. She's willing to pay whatever debt debts she has to society. She's even willing to spend years behind bars if that's the debt she owes. And she wants to speak out to ensure that other young women are not brainwashed and manipulated into committing the same horrible mistakes that she's done. And I think what's most mind-boggling is it appears that right now the Trump administration simply want to give her a free pass. They're wrongfully claiming that she's not a citizen and therefore not subject to U.S. jurisdiction. In other words, that she can go on free, and she herself is trying to turn herself in to our legal system to face the consequences for her actions.
Let's go ahead and work through the case with Sandra and me here one at a time. You mentioned brainwashed twice. That would be your defense then, clearly, correct?
Well, I'm not defending her. I'm not her criminal defense attorney. You know, what she did is unacceptable.
The suggestion from your answer is that she did not willingly leave, but she was manipulated.
No, she's accountable for her actions. She's accountable for her actions. She has to answer, as I mentioned, right in 2014 when she first left, she's going to have to answer to God for her decisions. However, I do believe manipulation played a role. I spoke to the Department of Homeland Security officials who told me, Hassan, what happened to Huda is no different than what happens to thousands of young, naive, foolish youth in America that get targeted by sex traffickers, violent gangs, and other hate groups who manipulate them and brainwash them into committing very foolish, horrible things that they're still accountable for, but that absent that manipulation probably would not have committed.
Hassan, there's been multiple things published that she said during her time with ISIS, and correct me if any of these are not wrong. She said she was going to burn her passport. She urged U.S. jihadis to commit massacres back home in America. She also tweeted out urging followers in the U.S. to, quote, rent a big truck and drive all over them at Memorial Day parades and to attack then President Barack Obama. With those words, why does she expect sympathy from Americans?
Well, I don't think she expects sympathy. She is very remorseful for whatever disgusting tweets and positions she put out. It's very important to note that we don't know what she actually tweeted herself of her own free volition versus what came out when she lost control over her social media to that group. But nonetheless, I mean, I'll be very frank. I remember when she called me and her parents infidels because we reported her to law enforcement and told her that going there is wrong and is un-Islamic and is immoral and is inhumane and is wrong. So she really did go off the deep end, and she's tremendously remorseful, and she's not asking for a free pass. She wants to come back, she wants to pay her debt to society, and she wants to speak out to ensure other people don't repeat those same mistakes.
She's 24 now. She left when she was 19. Are you saying you've been with her family, representing her family for 5 years now, since the beginning?
I've been in touch with the family since the beginning on assisting them to see how she can find a way to legally turn herself in.
When's the last time you spoke with her?
The last time I spoke with the family was very recently. I'm not getting into specifics right now on which family members we've been in touch with.
So you have not spoken. You're not confirming that you've ever spoken to her.
So the last time that I can comment about was when we told her that if you acknowledge your mistakes, then you need to turn yourself into American authorities. And the closest American authorities there are with the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces. You have to leave ISIS on your own without any support, and you have to make your way to the Syrian Democratic Forces and turn yourself in.
Okay,
and that was the last comment.
So she is in Syria, right? You're confirming that?
She's in northeast Syria, correct.
Northeastern Syria.
She's in northeast Syria in the hands of American allies that she turned herself into when she ran away from ISIS.
But not American forces, correct?
No, there aren't American forces easily accessible that she could have reached to, otherwise she would have turned herself into them.
How many others are being held like her there?
It's interesting. At that camp, I believe she's just one of two individuals who have American citizenship. There is another camp that has dozens of other Americans, but there's a lot of Europeans right now. Yes, there's a lot of Europeans, and that's not a huge number if you think about it. Over the last 5 years, there's only about a few dozen similar situated individuals. I wish it was zero, and that's why when she went out, we went out publicly, very ferociously condemning ISIS as deviants, as heretics who have committed horrible crimes against humanity, crimes against the Syrian people. I myself am of Syrian descent. I was born in Syria. They've destroyed my country.
Yeah, we reported a few days ago about hundreds that the Americans are trying to return them to their home countries in Europe. But that's the first I've heard about dozens of Americans. So Sandra, continue.
Hassan,
right. Go ahead.
You have said that the government needs to engage her, and I'm using your own words, but not just her, all these people who joined ISIS from the West. Are you suggesting that you're making the case that she could come home and help the U.S. government with what she has learned by joining ISIS?
I'm suggesting that she may have very valuable intelligence that the United States government can benefit from, and it's mind-boggling to me. Look, the most important thing, I got 3 kids in this country. I want them to grow up proud and safe as Americans, as young Muslims, proud of their faith, proud of their identity, proud of their citizenship. And the last thing I need is some scumbag monster hurting people in the name of my religion. That is disgusting and really something that as American Muslims we're always terrified of. So let's be real here. She was interviewed by ABC News, by The Guardian, by the New York Times, and the FBI. I personally called them. I said, listen, we know where she is, and she's ready to speak with you. She's ready to collaborate. She's ready to turn herself in. You should at least go question her, see if she has intelligence that can protect American lives. And they failed to act on it, and that's really concerning.
They're saying she's not a U.S. citizen born in Hackensack, New Jersey, because her father was a diplomat, and there's a debate right now as to the timing and all this. Appreciate you coming on and talking with us today. We'll see where it goes, but Mike Pompeo was very specific, as you heard him earlier today, sir.
Thank you, and God bless you.
He calls her a terrorist and says she will not come back home. Last comment.
Well, we have a legal process. And she's not asking for a free pass. She wants to turn herself in and be held accountable to our laws. We don't need to circumvent our laws. Our laws are great. Let's stand by them.
To what extent is she willing to come home and be punished, Hassan? I mean, life in prison. She's still willing to come back if that's the case.
Yes. She literally expressed fear that she will possibly may have to face decades in jail, potentially, and she's still willing to come back to America. She said, listen, I could have ran away to anywhere else. I could have tried to disappear. I didn't. I realized I was so wrong in my ways that I want to publicly testify how evil ISIS is, and I want to turn myself in, and I'm willing to pay the price for my crimes.
Hassan Shibli, thank you for your time, the attorney for the family. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you.
About 20 minutes before the hour, another alert right here. Jesse Smollett about to face a judge. You're going to see that in about 2 hours' time. Outraged Chicago police going public with his plot earlier today. So what is next in this case? How far does he go to defend himself? Stand by.
This was a completely made-up event, it seems. That's what the evidence seems to prove. And a total waste of resources by the Chicago Police Department, as well as undermining legitimate victims.
Absolute justice would be an apology to this city that he smeared, admitting what he did, and then be man enough to offer what he should offer up in terms of all the resources that were put into this.
Police in Chicago blasting Jesse Smollett just a short time ago. The New York Post calling him this morning on their cover, liar. This, as the Empire actor is all lawyered up now for his first court appearance a few hours from now in Chicago. Joining us right now is Eric Guster, criminal defense attorney and managing attorney of Guster Law Firm, LLC. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
What a few hours it has been. We await his appearance in court this afternoon. But for now, what a press conference we just saw from the Chicago PD. Really a lot of anger there over this hoax.
Yeah, there is a lot of anger. Whenever a person makes a false accusation, especially someone who's able to get all types of media attention, it really scars a city and a police department. Because police departments, they have a lot of scrutiny already, and they have a lot of problems with the murder rates and other crimes that have not been solved. So to take resources to investigate this that was not a real crime, it's very hurtful for them. It angers them, and we saw it in the press conference.
What do you think the extent of his punishment is going to be?
I would easily expect jail time in this one. If this was not a case where there was national media attention, it may not get to that level. However, Jesse went on Good Morning America. He went on different programs, and with his popularity, he put this into the stratosphere of everyone's national media attention. So what we have right now is someone who's in the media eye, who's in the nation's eye, who's lied, and he deserves punishment of some sort.
I want to put up a tweet from the president. Just a few minutes ago, he tweeted this. At Jesse Smollett, what about MAGA, Make America Great Again, and the tens of millions of people you insulted with your racist and dangerous comments, says the president, hashtag MAGA. And the police really weighed in on that too, Eric, talking about that these are incredibly important crimes that they urge to be reported when they do happen, these hate crimes. And this can take away from that, having somebody concoct this and have this play out, or pretend that this played out, and it could discourage others from reporting crimes like this.
Now, one of the biggest issues in reference to the MAGA statement that President Trump stated, the statements coming from Trump have been very racist as well, and very they brought fire and have ignited people.
Are you talking
to do
about on
different
this
things.
issue? I don't know what you're referencing there.
Well, I was referencing the president's tweet. We have to be careful that we have to be much more careful in what we say in reference to racism, what we say in reference to we need to attack journalists. So we have to be careful overall, not just what Jussie did, but what President Trump has done and people in his movement have said as well.
Well, he's clearly referencing this particular instance, and he was trying to make it out to be that this was an attack as a result of the president and his supporters. So, Eric, that being said...
And that was wrong. And I'll say that. Now, that was wrong for Jussie to do, but it's also a birth of what our nation has become, where we have people who are stoked by racism, are stoked by words, who are influenced by racist acts and told to do different things in the name of MAGA or anti-MAGA. So we have to get back to the core of loving each other and doing a better job of
Eric,
taking care of one another.
I want to jump in here because I want to get this new statement in, just released this morning from 20th Century Fox Television and Fox Entertainment. Quote, "We understand the seriousness of this matter and we respect the legal process. We are evaluating the situation and we are considering our options." That is an official statement just out, as this is obviously on which the show is hosted. Your final thoughts on that?
Jussie will be canned by 20th Century Fox like canned tuna. His career is over. He can forget going on TV again. He wrote this check himself.
All right. Eric Guster, we appreciate you coming on this morning. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Picked up this story a bit earlier. She is known as the Ivory Queen. Now she's been sentenced to a long prison term. The implications for a renowned wildlife activist working cases like this one for more than a decade. Coming up next, right after this. Breaking news from overseas a bit earlier today. The woman known as the Ivory Queen sentenced to 15 years in jail. She's a Chinese businesswoman sentenced for smuggling hundreds of elephant tusks out of Africa. She ran one of the biggest ivory black markets in Africa with millions of dollars at stake. Veronica Veracova has spent more than a decade on this issue. She's an African conservationist, and she joins me now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
How much of a breakthrough is that?
It's massive. It's huge. I mean, it's something that doesn't happen very often. It's very important to see that Chinese are actually starting to be caught for their disrespect for rule of law in African states. And, you know, I think we can see that Chinese historical priorities in Africa are no longer just related to trade, but also they are practicing Chinese traditions on the continent, which is not really familiar with them.
I think a lot of people have been our case for a while, though. And related to this, we had this John Bolton speech 2 months ago in December. I mean, just the headline for the New York Times outlining a strategy for Africa that's really countering China. That was the headline for the New York Times. And the Chinese are beating us in a lot of ways on that continent. They're doing it in ways that we really don't operate. But you've got this from the Wall Street Journal last week. Islamic State seeking next chapter makes inroads through West Africa. We've heard a lot about Boko Haram. We've heard a lot about Al-Shabaab. But how does that relate to a project you're working on right now, trying to conserve and send black rhinos back to the continent?
Well, the security of citizens in Africa and the wildlife and natural resources is obviously crucial. This goes into international security issues, right? And if you see the link between a very strong component to economies in Africa, which is tourism, if you see that those animals are not in the park and they unfortunately contribute financing these militant groups and Islamic groups on the continent, it's not really great for tourists to come.
So take me to your issue then, Veronica, because you're working with 5 different zoos throughout Europe. You're taking these rare black rhinos and you're moving them to Rwanda, which has been in the news for 30 years now.
Yeah.
What do you want to accomplish with this?
Well, we only have 5,000, a little bit over 5,000 rhinos, black rhinos left in Africa in the wild. And it's a perfect opportunity for European zoos to give back, right? And Rwanda is one of the most safest and very committed to conservation country. The park where we're bringing them is managed by African Parks, fantastic NGO. And then there's obviously the Rwandan authorities, which are really, the military in Rwanda is exceptional.
You testified before Congress, I think it was 2 years ago, and you helped pass a law for more than 10. How do you think this administration is doing on this issue?
We can understand, I think the translation of that will come to be clear when we speak more on these issues down the road. I think, given that Bolton's announcement of that U.S. Africa plan has just been announced, I think there's a lot to go into details. We have time to discuss that.
Well, I know it's close to your heart. Thanks for sharing
Very much
today.
So. Thank you for having me.
Good luck to you. The Black Rhinos will be there soon.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Pleasure seeing you.
Thank you.
All right. Sandra, what's that?
New fallout now for Jussie Smollett. We are awaiting the actor's first appearance in court today. So will he explain what exactly happened?